He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Y'all know what show it is. I'm the number one host on this show. You can call me Hot. So what are y'all doing this morning? Well, what we're going to do this morning, what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to watch yesterday's White House press secretary briefing to the press and American people so they can run certain stories. Because, that's what the media is supposed to do. But before we get to all that, I know this one guy, oh man, what's his name? The Kingdom Reacts or something like that. YouTube basically demonetized him overnight and he lost $60,000 that he has to pretty much fight for. And they just took it, hold it, and they're going to keep it. Because YouTube's like the government. They'll take your money, but when they owe you your money, they're not going to fucking do it. But as we speak government, obviously, you guys know I don't like the government, and I like to have music that fits the same way. So let's get the morning started off with Bryson. Smoke them if you got them.
They always offended, it's often admitted. I'm all independent, I irritate those awfully wicked. Wait, pause for a minute. Bryson, why you causing division? I loved your music, now you're homophobic, all for attention. They say I'm only popular because I'm controversial. But is it that your favorite rappers all with pop commercial? Y'all got Spotify to ban my songs, I guess my topics hurt you. And do y'all miss real hip-hop because this the time reversal? The baby can promote violence and drugs all on his CD, but he'll get canceled if he ever offends LGBT. I know everybody hates me, but I also know they need me, but they cancel me because I don't succumb my freedoms freely. Hey, hip-hop wasn't always like this, bruh. Believe me. Now rappers wearing dresses and calling each other sweetie. Well, somebody gotta say it, huh? Why can't it be me? Can I say screw Dr. Fauci? Can I say screw the CDC? Hey, Bryson, tone it down. You know we need your voice. God of the world. Well, that's an easy choice. Who has time for some white guy to BLM face mask? Playing my music, screaming everything that I say is bad. I can't bow down to the mob cause I'm too real. I can't be controlled cause I don't need a deal. They say you going way too far, you need to chill. Sorry, I don't really care about how you feel. Ay, I can't bow down to the mob cause I'm too real. I can't be controlled cause I don't need a deal. They say you going way too far, you need to chill. Ay, sorry, I don't really care about how you feel.
I resurfaced on purpose, I'm Houdini. Now I ain't going nowhere like I'm Tim Pool's beanie. I got permanent sermons and words that can burn through a genie. I could perfectly search for the surface and fly like an eagle, praise Jesus. Your favorite rapper is satanic, great panic in the place. It ain't safe to be straight magic. Play patterns in your face till your brain scrambles from bass samples. Can't handle the heat, then get away from the flame candles. Don't quote this song, just say a prayer to the Holy Cross. I flip like motocross cause the news is faker than Photoshop. My flow is cold and hot, it's like Noah's Ark next to molten rock. So when I'm focused on being close to God, I can open locks. Big Pharma must be lobbying rappers cause they be telling you to get injections, partying after. Kids are dying from the fentanyl while popping the Xanax. And now I want our friends to die, but that be part of this chapter. That's why I flip the script, hit the drip, get a grip, sedative, chill. Drink water, think smarter, ink ought to sit on the quill. They want black to keep the cycle on and white to hate themselves. So can't you tell they want us all in camps and both to stay in jail? Don't let us fail.
I can't bow down to the mob cause I'm too real. I can't be controlled cause I don't need a deal. They say you going way too far, you need to chill. Sorry, I don't really care about how you feel. Ay, I can't bow down to the mob cause I'm too real. I can't be controlled cause I don't need a deal. They say you going way too far, you need to chill. Ay, sorry, I don't really
All
care
right,
about
ladies
how
and
you
gentlemen,
feel.
that was Bryson Gray. Get a little blood flowing for this morning's Wake and Bake. Well, we're going to wake and bake with the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, and this is what she was telling the American people yesterday. Well, not so much telling the American people, but not telling the American people, if that makes any sense, which in my mind it doesn't. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let's get into this, as some of these other content creators say.
So before I turn things over to Jake, I have a couple of updates at the top,
Jake
and we'll
Tapper.
get this going. So this afternoon, President Biden will award the Medal of Honor, America's oldest and highest recognition for valor, to Captain Larry L. Taylor, United States Army. On June 18, 1968, then First Lieutenant Taylor led a helicopter team in Vietnam that rescued a four-man Army patrol unit, which had been surrounded by nearly 100 enemy forces. First Lieutenant Taylor and his wingmen braved intense ground fire for more than 30 minutes to provide aerial fire support until they were nearly out of ammunition. With the enemy still closing in on the patrol, First Lieutenant Taylor courageously decided to extract the team of American soldiers on the ground using his two-man Cobra helicopter, a feat that had never been accomplished or even attempted. First Lieutenant Taylor landed his helicopter under heavy enemy fire and with complete disregard for his personal safety.
Well,
He
that's a
successfully
helicopter
rescued
pilot.
the patrol team and carried them to a safe location. First Lieutenant Taylor's conspicuously gallantry, his profound concern for his fellow soldiers, and his actions, which went above and beyond the call of duty, are in keeping with the highest tradition of military service. In recognition of his service, he will be awarded the Medal of Honor here today at the White House this
Hell yeah.
afternoon. Now, as you all know, the president believes that education beyond high school should unlock doors to opportunity, not leave borrowers stranded with debt they cannot afford. That's why from day one, the Biden-Harris administration has been working to fix the broken student loan system, make college more
It's not
affordable, and
broken.
cancel loan debt for millions.
It's not broken. They agreed to sign it because it comes when you do your FAFSA. They have it below. Would you like to take a government student loan? And they give you a bunch of options. Now you don't have to click them, but when you do, you got to pay it back. Simple, plain and simple.
Of borrowers. In fact, to date, the Biden-Harris administration has canceled more than $117 billion in loan debt for 3.4 million borrowers.
And by cancel $1.4 billion, she meant we paid for that, not canceled, because it doesn't get canceled. It has to be paid.
Earlier today, the Biden-Harris administration announced that more than 4 million student loan borrowers are enrolled in the administration's new income-driven repayment plan, the Saving on a Valuable Education or SAVE plan. This includes those who were transitioned from the previous.
But you're not telling them that the interest payments have started back up. So now they kind of have to pay them with the interest. They had all that time not to pay it with interest or to pay it without interest, but hey, to each their own.
Revised pay-as-you-earn or repay plan. SAVE is the most affordable repayment plan ever and will save millions of borrowers money on their monthly payments. Student borrowers can visit studentaid.gov/save to sign up today. The application takes less than 10 minutes to fill out for most. And finally, an update on the president and the first lady since she tested positive for COVID-19 last night.
I'm glad. So Joe Biden tests positive for COVID-19. Not Oprah. What's her face? Whoopi Goldberg tested positive for COVID-19. And with Joe going over to this G20 summit with over 20 leaders from around the world, he doesn't have COVID because he got tested already twice. But that doesn't mean he's not carrying the new virus. So are we going to be responsible for quote unquote infecting the world by infecting 20 leaders? Or is the G20 summit being in Vietnam, is something going to happen to where 20 world leaders are suddenly gone and then everybody's looking to that one world government to go against the aggressors, Russia, China, and North Korea? Not that that's going to happen, but it would be crazy, right? And it would most likely be Americans doing the acts.
Tell you that the First Lady is experiencing mild symptoms and will remain in Delaware for the week. President Biden tested negative last night for COVID 19 and tested negative again today. He's not experiencing any symptoms. As far as the
But
steps
he's
that he is
82.
taking since the president was with the First Lady yesterday, he will be masking while indoors and around people in alignment with CDC guidance. And as has been the practice in the past, the president
Actually, it kind of sounds like another excuse to keep him from campaigning and going out and doing speeches and all that other stuff because one, the influenza is coming and it's really bad. But yeah, we already know the debates. All we gotta do is replay the last election's debates.
will remove his mask when sufficiently distanced from others indoors and while outside as well. The CDC guidelines recommend a combination of masking, testing, and monitoring for symptoms. The president is doing all of that in close consultation with his physician. There are currently no updates to the White House COVID 19 protocols. We continue to work closely with public health and medical professionals to monitor the virus. We're in our strongest position yet to fight COVID 19, and the virus is responsible for majority of fall and winter hospitalizations. As we
Pause. I'm gonna show you guys one thing for 1 second. This is why I like Rumble, and I don't like depending on other people because when I support them, they obviously don't support me, but they will support a guy who's just talking about nonsense. Look, I have 0 people watching on YouTube. This guy's talking about, other people, drama this, drama that, stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with, the rest of the world. But it's okay. 53 people watch that because it's good content with drama, not with real life. But I digress. And back. What's up, Nuz?
head into the fall, we have more tools and systems available today to help communities this fall and winter season, including safe, updated vaccines that will be available mid-September, widely available at-home COVID test, widely available
So
effective
you
treatment.
know what vaccine is widely available every September? I'll let y'all take a guess. It starts with flu and ends with flu.
Which can reduce the risk of severe illness,
No, it's my good
hospitalizations,
buddy.
and death. We will be encouraging, as I have said before, Americans to get their updated COVID 19 vaccine in addition to their annual flu shot and also RSV vaccines, as you all know.
So wait a second. They want people to get 3 vaccines right now, all at the same time. RSV, it's been around forever. Influenza's been around forever, and then the C word, that's been around for 3 years. Actually, longer because H1N1 was actually a COVID series.
With that, thank you, Jake, for your patience. Jake is going to talk about the president's travel to India and any other foreign policy questions that you may have.
Oh, it's in India. Sorry, not Vietnam.
Thank you, Karine, and thanks to all of you for giving me the opportunity to be here today. And Karine mentioned my patience. I'm going to test your patience for a moment because I'd like to take a few minutes at the top just to set the scene for the president's upcoming trip to Delhi for the G20 and to Vietnam to elevate our partnership with Vietnam. On Thursday, the president will travel to New Delhi, India to attend the G20 Leaders Summit. On Friday, President Biden will participate in a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Modi of the Republic of India. And on Saturday and Sunday, the president will participate in the official session.
So with this G20 summit, and they're trying to, get the world to be, I guess, unified. I know Russia's part of the G20. Are they gonna be there? I mean, are we actively having talks with Putin and the UN and NATO to try to end this? I mean, these are all good questions, but they're all rhetorical questions at the same time. So I don't know why I asked them.
Of the G20 summit. As the president heads to the G20, he's committed to working with emerging market partners to deliver big things together. That's what we believe the world will see in New Delhi this weekend.
Okay, I've been hearing big things, historic things, but I haven't seen any of this. So what are we going to do on the world stage as far as bettering them, changes? I don't see anything.
The United States' commitment to the G20 hasn't wavered, and we hope this G20 summit will show that the world's major economies can work together even in challenging times. So as we head into New Delhi, our focus is going to be on delivering for developing countries, making progress on key priorities for the American people, from climate to technology, and showing our commitment to the G20 as a forum that can actually, as I said before, deliver. And thanks to the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and India's presidency, we hope we'll be able to do all of those things. We're also looking forward to warmly welcoming the African Union as a permanent member of the G20, the newest permanent member. We believe that the African Union's voice will make the G20 stronger. Let me say a few more words stepping back about what the United States is bringing to the table as we head into this summit.
Nothing.
Here at home, President Biden has worked to rebuild the American economy, as you've all heard him say, from the bottom up and the middle out, by making smart investments in the industries of the future while tackling climate change and empowering workers. And we believe,
just in case you guys don't know who attends the G20 summit, let me take a drag and I'm gonna let y'all know. I knew Russia was part of the India, obviously, because they're hosting. The United States, Indonesia, Australia, Japan, the UK, Turkey, Germany, China, Russia, Mexico, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Italy, France, Canada, Brazil, South Africa, and South Korea. China and Russia, huh? Okay. I mean, that doesn't really mean anything.
that those
Are they gonna be
investments
there,
are paying off. We think countries around the world, too, can benefit from a similar type of approach, and that we can help them as well by mobilizing investment to support them in tackling the challenges that they face. And that's one of our main focuses heading into the G20, delivering on an agenda of fundamentally reshaping and scaling up the multilateral development banks, especially the World Bank and the IMF. We know that these institutions are some of the most effective tools that we have for mobilizing transparent, high-quality investment into developing countries. And that's why the United States has championed the major effort that is currently underway to evolve these institutions so that they are up to the challenges of today and tomorrow. Just last month, President Biden asked Congress for additional funds that would have the impact of increasing World Bank financing by more than $25 billion. And we're working to make sure.
Wait, why are we financing the World Bank? That doesn't make any fucking sense. With taxpayer dollars?
That other partners follow our lead. And at the G20, we've been leading an effort that we hope will see the G20 endorse this level of ambition and deliver a broader vision of
Wow, Denise may not be as crazy as she thought. That's one step closer to digital currency.
Multilateral development banks that are better,
ESG
bigger,
scores.
and more effective. President Biden will also be calling on G20 members as leaders in the global economy to provide meaningful debt relief so that low and middle income countries can regain their footing after years of extreme stress. He'll be clear that the United States expects real progress on ongoing cases by the World Bank and IMF annual meetings in Marrakesh next month. And he will be clear that we need all G20 members to be constructive.
So that's the thing. Let me be clear. We already know what that means. It means he's about to blow some bullshit up your ass, and you're gonna accept it or go to jail. So he's gonna go there and he's gonna be clear with all these countries in the G20 summit. Joe, I think they don't fear you. They don't respect you. They don't respect America. And you're just a big joke. So when you're gonna be clear, they're gonna tell you to fuck off because you're probably gonna be falling asleep anyway.
And at the table with no exceptions. We'll also be making progress on other key priorities, from climate to health to digital technology, including commitments with respect to a more inclusive digital transformation and a responsible path and approach to AI development.
Of course,
In
AI.
addition, we'll spotlight the progress that we've been making on the
They're pushing AI so much. I think it's gonna become like their way of, oh, this is the new Patriot Act, but we're not gonna call it the Patriot Act. We're gonna make everything digital. Okay, everything's digital. No one's gonna be able to get any of your information because it's gonna be secure, guys. It's gonna be secure. They're gonna watch. Big Brother will be watching.
Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, or what we call PGI. We'll have some announcements that we're excited about. Now, we know that there'll be continued focus on how the G20 deals with Russia's illegal and ongoing war in Ukraine. The reality is that Russia's illegal war has had devastating social and economic consequences, and the poorest countries on the planet are bearing the brunt of that. As he has done before, President Biden.
Like, what are these ports? Eastern Europe, Cambodia, they're affected by this. Yeah.
Biden will call for a just and durable peace, one founded in respect for international law, principles of the UN Charter, the precepts of territorial integrity and sovereignty, and he will continue to.
You mean like agreeing not to move any further eastward at the end since the Cold War ended, but slowly pushing some of those USSR countries to silently join NATO? And you think no one's going to notice?
Emphasize that the United States will support Ukraine for as long as it takes to redeem these principles. Last but not least, and this is important, you'll see that the United States will make it clear that we remain committed to the G20 as a critical forum for all of the major economies of the world to come together for global problem solving. At a moment when the international economy is suffering from historic and overlapping shocks, it's more important than ever that we have a working forum with the world's largest economies to deliver meaningful outcomes. So in a sign of that commitment, the United States is looking forward to hosting the G20 in 2026. Now, turning briefly to Vietnam. On September 10th, the president will travel to Vietnam to meet with the General Secretary and Vietnam's top.
So September 10th, he's going to be in Vietnam. So I'm assuming he's not going to be in New York City the next day, the following day. Oh, okay.
Top leadership. Building on President Biden's string of diplomatic successes in the Indo-Pacific just this year, this visit is a remarkable step in the strengthening of our diplomatic ties, and it reflects the leading role that Vietnam will play in our growing network of partnerships in the Indo-Pacific as we look to the future. For decades, the U.S. and Vietnam have worked to overcome a painful shared legacy of the Vietnam War, working hand in hand to promote reconciliation, with our service members and our veterans lighting the way, work that is dear to the president's heart, particularly in light of his close friendship with Senator John McCain. As we survey common challenges on everything from the South China Sea to critical and emerging technologies, the United States and Vietnam will chart out a vision for facing the 21st century together with an elevated and energized partnership. And finally, Vice President Harris is traveling literally as we speak to Jakarta, Indonesia, to attend the US-ASEAN Summit and the East Asia Summit, and to engage with leaders from across the Indo-Pacific from September 5th to September 7th. Her upcoming visit will be her fourth visit to the Indo-Pacific in 2 years and her third visit to Southeast Asia. Vice President Harris has met with more than 36 presidents.
It's okay, guys. They're not using fossil fuels. They're using these new airplanes. They go directly off sunlight. And as long as you stay above the clouds, you're good to go. Now, when the night comes out, they have this special thing that uses the moonlight, and it helps. You guys don't believe me, do you? Because I don't either.
and prime ministers from the Indo-Pacific. And throughout her work, she is focused on strengthening alliances and partnerships, driving economic growth in the United States, and upholding international rules and norms. At both summits, the Vice President will underscore the United States' enduring commitment to the Indo-Pacific generally and to ASEAN centrality specifically. And we look forward to having her be able to report back to the President on those trips as the President embarks on his own trip to India and Vietnam. I told you that I was going to test your patience a bit. I think I made good on my promise. So with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Yeah.
Given what we know about how COVID works, I understand the president is negative now, but are you planning for any contingencies in case he does test positive in the coming days or during the trip? Could he attend any of these meetings virtually? Are you thinking ahead to that?
I'll let Karine speak to COVID planning here at the White House, as it's beyond my ken. But of course, we have long experience now from the early days of the administration in managing for situations in which COVID plays a role in summits. And, we've seen various leaders at various times participate virtually in events. But in terms of specific contingency planning here from the White House, Karine can speak to that.
And just one more. On Sunday, the president said he was disappointed that President Xi was not going to be attending the G20, but then he said, I'm going to get to see him. What did he mean by that? Has something been scheduled here?
Nothing's been scheduled, but the president has said before that he's looking forward to picking up the conversation that he had with President Xi in Bali last year, and he fully intends to do that in the months ahead. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Can you, just following up on that point, give us a sense of the timing? Do you think that conversation might take place in the coming weeks, in the coming months?
I can't give you a sense of timing today.
Okay, on North Korea, very quickly, there are obviously reports that Kim Jong-un could be poised to visit Russia. This comes as the White House has recently said arms negotiations between North Korea and Russia were, quote, actively advancing. What is the latest assessment of the state of play between those two countries?
Weird, because you think about it, I don't think Biden, since he's taken office, has met with Putin or Kim Jong-un. But oddly enough, President Trump did, and there was no issues between any of those three countries or Ukraine. Basically everything that's caused by a liberal president, like he just erased. He even started getting peace in the Middle East, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because he has mean tweets. It's the mean tweets and the ballot harvesting.
Well, actively advancing captures it well. Our current analysis is that discussions between North Korea and Russia with respect to North Korea providing military support to Russia for its war in Ukraine, that those discussions are actively advancing. Most recently, we saw the defense minister of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, make a trip to Pyongyang, in essence, to ask for weapons. And we also have information, as we have indicated.
So why would Russia be going to North Korea for weapons? Now, that doesn't make any sense.
Publicly, that North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, has some expectation that those discussions will continue as we go forward, including leader-level discussions, perhaps even in-person leader-level discussions. Now, I can't get into all the details of what we know, but at the broad parameters, that is what we are seeing. Ongoing discussions and discussions where we have information that the leadership of North Korea sees this as potentially leading to leader-level engagement. And I would just add that we have been discussing publicly the possibility of North Korea supplying weapons to Russia for quite some time. And the reason why that there is such an intense effort on the part of Moscow to generate this kind of support from North Korea is that we have continued to squeeze Russia's defense industrial base, and they are now going about looking to whatever source they can find for things like artillery ammunition. That's what we see going on now, and we will continue to call it out, and we will continue to call on North Korea to abide by its public commitments not to supply weapons to Russia that will end up killing Ukrainians.
Any indication of listening to those very...
No. We're supplying weapons to Ukraine to kill Ukraine. Come on, man.
Over time, we have not seen them actively supply large amounts of munitions or other military capacity to Russia for the war in Ukraine. I cannot predict to you what will happen at the end of this. I can only say that the discussions have been actively advancing, and the Russians have imbued them with an increased intensity, as reflected in the fact that their defense minister, their number one guy in their defense establishment, actually got on a plane and flew to Pyongyang to try to push this forward. Yeah.
Jake, just wanted to talk to you about G20 for a second, but just to follow up on North Korea, could we get a little bit more analysis of how you think this is benefiting the North Koreans or what they want out of this? Do you think that part of this has to do with them getting less?
So does this make them the new axis of evil? North Korea, China, Russia, and honestly, probably Vietnam. Just saying. That's the big world on one. Wow, they no shit. They're trying to take out Tartier all over again.
Than they want from their traditional patron in Beijing? Do you think that the U.S. has any leverage in terms of what it can do here in terms of either providing food aid to the North Koreans or ratcheting up sanctions? Where's the room for movement there?
So I can't speculate on North Korea's motives. What I can say is this: providing weapons to Russia for use on the battlefield to attack grain silos and the heating infrastructure of major cities as we head into winter, to try to conquer territory that belongs to another sovereign nation. This is not going to reflect well on North Korea, and they will pay a price for this in the international community. We have also imposed sanctions, specific targeted sanctions, to try to disrupt any effort to use North Korea as a conduit or as a source for weapons going to Russia. We did so as recently as mid-August. And we have continued to convey privately as well as publicly to the North Koreans, and asked allies and partners to do the same, our view that they should abide by their publicly stated commitments that they're not going to provide these weapons. What has changed in their calculus is not something that I can speak to. That's in the mind of Kim Jong-un, and he obviously will be the ultimate decision maker. But we will continue to look for opportunities to dissuade the North Koreans from taking this step, to get others to do the same, and to report to the world what we are seeing in terms of the actively advanced.
Why are they trying to actively start another conflict in on maps? What is Tartaria? You didn't get them the first time, or are they making a comeback? They're all around the world now, government guys. What y'all gonna do? We're everywhere.
Discussions that are taking place between these two countries.
And then on G20, just cognizant of the fact that the State Department has blistering human rights reports out on both of the countries that Biden is going to, India and Vietnam, including passages about their restrictions on freedom of expression for the media, threats of violence, arrests, this sort of thing. Is that something that the U.S. journalists who are traveling with Biden should expect? And are you taking any actions to ensure their safety ahead of that trip?
Well, first of all, the ability of the American press traveling with President Biden to be able to go to the G20 and cover the G20 in an unencumbered way is something that has been a serious priority for this White House, for me personally, as recently as just this morning. And we are putting our money where our mouth is in terms of making sure that American press will have all of the access that they need and are entitled to as members of the international.
So they'll have all the access they need. However, as long as their stories are approved by mainstream media and the White House.
Press as members of the White House press. Secondly, President Biden himself has spoken to questions related to democracy and human rights as recently as the state visit earlier this year. The United States, our position on these issues is clear, is reflected in the statements of our president. It is, of course, reflected in the reports that you're referring to. And when it comes to the trip to Vietnam, we believe that we have a powerful opportunity to advance our partnership in a way that will deliver for the American people and will deliver broader security, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. But we also...
You really think Vietnam wants to help the Americans? No. You think getting Vietnam will help with fighting China and Russia? You're severely mistaken.
So always raise issues related to freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and other basic human rights that are at the core of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This trip will be no exception to that. Yeah.
What does it say about the state of Russian supply lines that they're asking of all people, the North Koreans, for help? And is North Korea able to provide artillery and the things you were
Well,
talking about?
are they for sure they're going to North Korea for weapons? Or is this mainstream media Operation Mockingbird making people think that's what the meeting's about? That wouldn't surprise me.
At a volume that could have any kind of meaningful impact on the conflict?
We have asked our intelligence community that second question. It is a good question. Our visibility into both the question of quantity of stocks and then, of course, quality of stocks is somewhat constrained, but it's something that we will continue to look at carefully. I think there is an open question about how much material and what the quality of the material is that could be provided if it were to be provided. And then I think it says a lot that Russia is having to turn to a country like North Korea to seek to bolster its defense capacity in a war that it expected would be over in a week, that in September
You meant like
2023,
2 weeks to flatten the curve?
it is going to North Korea to get munitions to try to continue to grind out on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Like on the G20,
Look at Russia. Look at Ukraine. Russia could have ended this war in one day. But they didn't. Because what war? Until the U.S. stepped in.
my colleague asked the China question, but is the president scheduled to meet with Mohammed bin Salman or Erdogan or any of these other leaders that we might be interested in while he's there?
I don't know who, I laugh because I don't know who fits on the list of who you might be interested in. It's like there are two categories, the ones you're not interested in and the ones you are interested
We're
in.
interested in all of them. I'm the State Department nerd. I'm interested in all of them.
Okay.
However, those two specifically.
All right. We don't have bilaterals scheduled with either of those two leaders at this time. I'm not going to speak to how the schedule will shape up over the course of the coming days. And as you know, there's a certain dynamic element to this, which is all of these leaders in a very confined space with time on the margins. So some of the bilateral engagements, as you saw last year in Indonesia,
Y'all heard
will
them though,
likely
right?
be
All these world leaders in one small space. That doesn't ring any bells. That doesn't even ring any, red alarms or whatever, red flags.
announced at the last minute, and we will do our darndest to make sure that they are done in a way where the U.S. press has the ability to participate in them. Yeah.
Thank you. The Bali communique said that most members of the G20 condemned the war in Ukraine. What progress has been made in the last 10 months to get India and China on board with that position?
Well, first of all, India signed on to the statement, most members. It was, as I recall, Russia who was the main objector to the proposition that so many of the other members of the G20 signed on to. I don't expect that Russia is going to flip its position on the Ukraine war this year. So to get absolute consensus on a statement on Ukraine is challenging because you've got Russia seated at the table, albeit not at the leader level because Putin isn't going to be there. But the fact that
you're going to try to
most members of the G20, as most members of the UN General Assembly, continue to hold the position that Russia's war was illegal, in violation of the UN Charter, and that this war must end on terms consistent with the UN Charter, that is the result of months of hard diplomacy by the United States and our partners, and it continues to reflect where international sentiment is on this issue.
And what assurances has the administration received from the Congress that the U.S. will be able to continue funding Ukraine's defenses going forward?
Well, we are working closely with the Congress, as you know, right now on a supplemental funding package that the president has submitted, seeking funding through the end of the year. We've been working with both the Senate and the House. We've had constructive conversations on a bipartisan basis in both chambers. We believe we will be able to secure the necessary funding as we go forward. I'm not going to speak to assurances per se, but the conversations have been constructive, they've been positive, they've been substantive, and we anticipate being able to work our way through to a sound package so that Ukraine can get what it needs. Yeah.
On World Bank reforms, on the one hand, you've talked about it not being about a specific country, that it's not about China. On the other hand, though, you have said that you need an alternative to the, quote, coercive and unsustainable lending through the Belt and Road Initiative. So, I mean, how can it be about China and not be about China at the same time?
Well, we believe that there should be high standard, non-coercive lending options available to low and middle income countries. That's a fact. It's also a fact that World Bank reform is not about China, in no small part because China is a shareholder in the World Bank. So growing the size, relevance, capacity of the World Bank to deliver for low and middle income countries is not against China. It's for the entire international community, all of the shareholders of the World Bank, China being one of them. And we believe that just as the United States would benefit from a more stable, more capable set of low and middle income countries being able to deal with their own problems with help from the World Bank and the IMF, China would benefit from that too.
But there is at least a part of it that is focused on China, on those coercive practices of those reforms.
This is an affirmative agenda. It is an agenda about providing high standards, transparent, sustainable, resilient funding streams to countries that cut through the red tape and give not just the poorest countries in the world, but middle income countries who are dealing with the stresses of climate and COVID and migration and the war in Ukraine, access to capital that they can actually take advantage of and put to work. That's not against anybody. That is not a negative agenda. That is an affirmative agenda, positive agenda, and one that's been embraced not just by the United States, not just by our closest allies, but by a very wide range and diverse set of countries. And we believe it will be embraced by the G20 as a whole when we go to New Delhi.
If I may just finally, you mentioned China being the third largest shareholder. How does it impact that Xi Jinping won't be at the table when you're asking for various reforms? Does it change the pitch at all, or how does that change with them not
Exactly, Larp.
It
I
won't
never
change our
understood
pitch.
that.
And you know, our
'Cause you
pitch is
think about it, that right after he gave $700 to each Lahaina residents, then he sent like shit, something like another 20 billion in Ukraine to Ukraine within 24 hours of it. That shit doesn't make sense.
been
Glad
consistent,
someone else
working
pays attention to that.
into the summit. President Biden will reinforce it. China will have representatives at the table, albeit not represented at the leader level, but the United States is going to put forward the same straightforward, in our view, clear-cut case for why this is so important. And more importantly, we'll also put on the table the fact that we are asking the Congress for financing to be able to make sure that the United States is not just talking the talk, but we're actually walking the walk. Yeah.
Two on the Saudi announcement today and then one on China. On the Saudi announcement to extend the supply of oil curbs, can you talk to us about what that means to you geopolitically, how serious it is for the global oil market? We saw crude go above $90 a barrel today. And then separately, does that up the ante for meeting with the Saudis at fora like the G20 where you want to do big things with EMs, as you mentioned?
So on the first question, I'll leave it to others to speak to the specific oil market impacts. I would point out that what was announced today was a continuation of an existing policy, not a new set of cuts, just a continuation of those cuts for 3 months as opposed to for 1 month. So as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing that the president is focused on is just trying to do everything within his toolkit to be able to get lower prices for consumers at the gas pump in the United States. It's really the price of a gallon of gas for the American consumer.
I have a great idea. How about we manufacture our own oil? I know we have the supplies, but you do stuff like shut down the Keystone Pipeline, taking away 2,400 jobs, and the ability for us to stay energy dependent with ourselves. That kind of helps. Yeah, you guys are doing a great job, though. Inflation's at an all-time low. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the United States.
Not
It's all historic.
the question of which country's doing what here or there that is going to be his ultimate metric for whether we're succeeding or not. Secondly, as I said before, we don't currently have bilateral meetings scheduled at the G20 to announce with any leaders. I don't think that the announcement today is going to move us one way or another in terms of engaging with leaders at the G20. So, we'll make our decisions on that on the basis of a far broader set of considerations than any one policy.
And although for communications in the future with the Saudis, I mean, does it make it more pressing to engage with them on this issue?
We have obviously regular engagement with the Saudis at multiple levels with their.
I don't know how hard is it to negotiate with the Saudis, but funny enough, they should get Vince McMahon to help negotiate with the Saudis because he obviously negotiated one PLE, at least one premium live event in Jakarta once a year. At least, I think it's once a year at least. And that makes money for both of them. So the Vince McMahon might be somebody to talk to because he's rubbing elbows with those crown princes. Just saying. What do I know?
Their energy minister with their leadership, and that will continue. And we will make sure that they understand where we stand, and we will come to understand where they stand as well. And the thing that we ultimately stand for is a stable, effective supply of energy to the global markets so that we can, in fact, deliver relief to consumers at the pump, and also that we do this in a way that is consistent with the energy transition over time.
China. My Bloomberg colleagues reported that Huawei has reached a breakthrough with its new smartphone that shows it's using the most advanced chips produced by Chinese chip maker SMIC. I'm wondering how concerned you are about this development, and does it prove that the U.S. export controls are failing or that they're violating those export controls?
I'm going to withhold comment on the particular chip in question until we get more information about precisely its character and composition. And from my perspective, though, what it tells us, regardless, is that the United States should continue on its course of a small yard, high fence set of technology restrictions focused narrowly on national security concerns, not on the broader question of commercial decoupling. That is where our emphasis has been. That's where it's going to continue, sort of regardless of the outcome. But in terms of characterizing the chip in question, that's something that we need to gain more information from before we make any definitive comments on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you see the tension between India and China affecting cooperation, especially with the climate issue in the summit, and ultimately affecting the perhaps the results that could be achieved in the summit? And second, if you allow me, today Secretary Blinken spoke to both Israel Prime Minister and the Palestinian President. Shall we read into this as more than just a routine call and maybe a serious steps towards normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia? And will the President meet with the Crown Prince on this summit? Thank you.
I think I've answered your last question. With respect to Secretary Blinken's calls, I wouldn't describe them as run-of-the-mill or routine. He speaks with these leaders occasionally, but not every month. But it also does not portend any imminent breakthrough or action with respect to the question of normalization. It's an important moment for a check-in at a high level, and Secretary Blinken is well poised to do that given his relationships with both men and the central role that he is playing in efforts to explore whether in fact a broader normalization is possible. But beyond that, I won't characterize the call. As far as the question of tensions between India and China affecting the summit, really that's up to China. If China wants to come in and play the role of spoiler, of course, that option is available to them. What I think the chair, India, will encourage them to do, what we, the United States, and every other member, virtually every other member of the G20 will do, is encourage them to come in a constructive way on climate, on multilateral development bank reform, on debt relief, on technology, and set aside the geopolitical questions and really focus on problem solving and delivering for the developing countries. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. I have two questions. Recently, North Korean Kim Jong-un said that it had tested a tactical nuclear weapons by launching missiles. How is the U.S. analyzing this? The second question is Russia Defense Minister Shoigu said that the North Korea-Russia maritime joint military exercises are possible. How are you concerned about this?
We're staying in close consultation with both South Korea and Japan on the question of North Korea's advancing nuclear and missile capabilities. I don't have a specific comment on their most recent characterization. They're prone to making a lot of statements of a lot of different flavors. We're just studying each of their individual tests and making determinations about their capabilities accordingly. And then we're responding to that through increasingly tight and interconnected trilateral cooperation, as most recently evidenced in the President's summit with President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida at Camp David. And then with respect to the comments by Shoigu on the military exercises.
Before this motherfucker says anything, with these military exercises between countries, they cannot say shit because we're literally occupying every country along that border doing joint missions with those fucking countries. So I don't want to hear shit about them complaining about it.
As far as I'm concerned, Russia looking to do more military exercises with North Korea, that's their business if they should choose to do so. I think if you look at the broader pattern of activity across the Indo-Pacific, the security cooperation, the exercises, the work together on trying to ensure a secure, open, and prosperous Indo-Pacific, what the United States has done with a broad network of allies and partners, I believe has enhanced the stability and security of that region.
So they're all talking about the Indo-Pacific region. But why are they not telling people we're occupying the entire eastern part of Europe? That's crazy to think that, especially knowing that we already authorized combat pay for Ukraine, which we're not supposed to have anybody there. Makes total sense. But anyway.
And the year 2023 has been a year of substantial progress in that regard, delivered by President Biden, from our relationship with India to Southeast Asia, to Australia, to the Pacific Islands, and then, of course, to Korea and Japan. So we're quite hopeful about the progress we have made in enhancing our own deterrent capability, our own security and prosperity, and we'll let other countries and the relationships they're developing speak for themselves. Yeah.
Thanks. Brett McGurk is in Riyadh, and so are Palestinian negotiators. Can you update us at all on Saudi-Israel-U.S. diplomacy talks? And then I have a quick follow-up.
So Brett's trip this time is focused on a set of broader regional issues. One of the main things that has brought him there, along with Barbara Leaf, the Assistant Secretary of State of Near East Affairs, and Tim Lenderking, our Special Envoy for Yemen, is to talk about the war in Yemen. We are entering either our 17th or 18th month.
That's all right, because, when we released, prisoners from Guantanamo Bay, guess where we sent them? What country did he just say? Yemen.
Of a truce, the longest period of peace in Yemen in years, which has been delivered in part through painstaking U.S. diplomacy. We not only want to keep that going, we want to deepen it and get to a permanent peace in Yemen. And that's one of the main reasons that Brett is there. He'll also be meeting with the Crown Prince of Bahrain in advance of his trip here next week. And then, of course, he will speak to the Palestinians about the whole range of issues relative to the Israeli-Palestinian file. Normalization will be one of the topics on the agenda, but it's not the main thrust of this trip. And like I said before, with respect to the phone call Secretary Blinken made today, we don't expect any imminent announcements or breakthroughs in the period ahead.
Does the administration support Palestinians' public demand, though, that they'll accept nothing less than statehood?
I'm not going to negotiate from the podium on the question of normalization, how the various pieces fit together. Yeah.
Jake, it seems like every administration, when it gets into office, complains about the problems it inherits from the previous administration. But how do you defend this administration's role with issues like Russia, China, North Korea, Iran? It seems like in all of those cases, our relationship is worse than it was before.
Well, first of all, Russia decided to launch a massive land war in Ukraine. The United States has mobilized not just the West, but a coalition of dozens of countries and more than 140 countries have voted for a UN General
What it was
Assembly
is,
resolution.
fuck, I can't really put this on YouTube. It's gonna get me banned. Never mind.
Condemning what Russia did. If you look at the U.S. leadership in that regard, we have stopped Russia from being able to take over a sovereign state. We have ensured that Ukraine will continue as a viable, free, sovereign democracy out into the future. In the support we have given to the brave and courageous Ukrainians out there on the front lines. I think the story of how the U.S. has stood up to Russia and galvanized the world to do so is a significant achievement of President Biden, and one that we expect to continue. With respect to China,
Because standing up to Russia, Europe doesn't get any fuel from them, or oil from them anymore, because the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up by did I say United States? I didn't mean the United States, but I meant United States. So cutting off more oil, straining the rest of the oil production around the world, and at the same time, we're still taking our oil, our strategic supply, we empty that, sending it to other countries. We don't need a strategic supply, because we don't start wars.
I'm not sure I'd agree with your characterization of the previous administration, but I'm not interested in comparisons. We're taking our own approach on this, which is to ensure that we compete intensively to put the United States in the strongest position possible, while at the same time managing that competition so that it doesn't tip over into conflict. We believe we are managing the competition effectively. And from the question of what we inherited to where we are today, if you look at the US economy and you look at China's economy, if you look at the US's alliances and the strength that we have built up in the Indo-Pacific and beyond, we feel very good about the strategic position of the United States in terms of the unfolding competition. With respect to Iran, I would just point out that under the administration before the previous guy, Iran's nuclear program was in a box. The last guy let it out of the box. We are now trying to manage the results of that decision, and we are doing so while deterring Iran from going for a nuclear weapon. We have thus far been able to do that. It's something we remain vigilant about every day. And finally, with respect to North Korea, the previous administration believed that if it simply engaged in summit-level diplomacy, it could end North Korea's missile and nuclear program. By the time we took office, North Korea's missile and nuclear programs had accelerated dramatically. The most important breakthrough we had seen from them, the first test of an intercontinental ballistic missile, that didn't happen on Joe Biden's watch. That happened before he came to office. So we are dealing with the inheritance not just of the last administration, but multiple administrations on North Korea. And we are doing so in a way where we have...
Not on his watch, but you just said it was previous administrations, to include Barack Obama's administration. They were doing good things, historic things.
Drawn more closely together, the US, Japan, and Korea in a historic summit that has strengthened our capacity to deter and defend the interests of the United States and our allies and partners going forward. So if you look at the overall position of the United States as it relates to those four countries, as it relates to our broader alliances and partnerships, and as it relates to the underlying sources of national strength, our manufacturing, our infrastructure, our technology, all of this, we believe we will leave better than we found it by the time President Biden exits this office. Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. I wanted to return to the Ukraine supplemental, and you said that you believe that you'll be able to secure the necessary funding. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about why you believe that and whether it's getting harder to get those supplementals through Congress, and also why the administration doesn't do more to sell the American public on the need for those requests.
So, on the first question, our view is that the strong bipartisan support for Ukraine in the Congress, in both the House and the Senate, has been on evidence, has been on display, not just in the past votes for Ukraine funding, but in the current public statements of critical members of both parties in really important positions in the Senate, as well as key chairs of committees in the House. And so we believe that there is still, while there are some dissonant voices, a strong core on a bipartisan basis of support for ensuring that we continue to provide Ukraine with the support that it needs, because it's fundamentally in America's national interest to do so. And with the question of quote unquote selling it, the president has made clear repeatedly since this conflict began what the stakes are for the American people. That letting Russia run roughshod over Ukraine would put Europe at risk, and we know what happens when a marauding, aggressive, hostile power places the continent of Europe in military risk. It comes at much greater cost, not just in American treasure, but in American lives later. And so let's make the investments now to ensure we uphold the fundamental rules of the international order. The president has made that case repeatedly. We believe if you actually look at where public attitudes are, that they've been surprisingly resilient, despite the constant assertion that the bottom is going to fall out.
I'm curious, have they actually had an actual vote for the people of Ukraine? I know there's been like three territories that did, and they voted that they wanted to be part of the Russian Federation. But the UN and the United States are like, no, that's bullshit. That is, democracy doesn't work. That's how democracy works, but that's not how it's supposed to work. Because it's not how they wanted it. But if the people of Ukraine actually voted, do we want to continue war, or do we want to just join the Russian Federation, or do we want peace, or do we want Zelensky out because he's one of the main perpetrators?
And similarly, we believe support will hold up in the Congress for us to be able to continue to provide Ukraine with the support that it needs. But we don't take that for granted. That's something we need to go work at every day, consult with members, ensure we're answering their questions, ensure accountability for every dollar that's spent, ensure that our allies and partners are stepping up and doing the burden sharing so that they're carrying their fair share of the load. We're doing all of those things too. And I think in a dynamic discussion with the Congress, we believe that we can secure a good funding package when all is said and done.
I feel like support is still steady rather than eroding in terms of monetary support for Ukraine.
What I will say is we believe that there is still a strong base of bipartisan support in the Congress to pass a material package that Ukraine needs to be able to not just sustain its gains on the battlefield, but also to ensure that those gains can be consolidated and not rolled back as we go forward. Yeah.
A member of your team said in recent days that the administration is actively negotiating with the Maduro regime in Venezuela about exchanging sanctions relief for concrete steps toward democratic elections.
Wait, so we're in constant negotiations with a communist country, socialist country, and we're trying to tell them how to do shit. Is that? But they don't want to try to go to the table with Russia or North Korea or China, but they're willing to do, Maduro. That doesn't make sense. Oh, because they have oil too. Yeah, we're going to tell them they have to produce oil and give us a cut.
Believe that Maduro has any actual interest in democratic elections?
Nope.
Look, I'm not going to speak to promises, pledges, hopes for the future. The administration's position has been clear and consistent for a long time. We're prepared to engage in discussions about specific sanctions relief in return for concrete steps that lead us towards a free and fair election. So our measurement is not about promises. It's not about what we may get on the come. It is about getting clear, concrete benchmarks and steps along the way. And I'm not going to characterize any current diplomatic discussions in that regard, just to state that that is our North Star. We're going to judge by actions, not by words. And that's how we approach our sanctions relief policy, not just with respect to Venezuela, but other countries as well.
And
yeah.
Just on Haiti quickly, with the General Assembly coming up at the UN, what kind of priority of it is it, for the administration to pass a resolution through the Security Council that would operationalize a multilateral force in Haiti? And what kind of force do you want to see? Do you want it to have the ability to actually go out front into the streets in Haiti and actually secure, key ports and bridges and so on?
What we're looking to do is to support a multinational force that is fundamentally a policing support mission, not a military mission, and one that is in support of the Haitian national police, taking over the sovereign policing capacities from the Haitian National Police. In terms of the precise operational elements of that, how they will operate physically in Port-au-Prince and other parts of Haiti, I'm going to defer that question because the experts are engaging to work out what an operational plan would look like. In terms of New York, it is certainly our priority to get the necessary backing that we feel we need to build for a multinational force and to get the resources necessary. And we've said that we're willing to put forward a substantial investment to do that, and we're asking other countries to do the same. Last question.
Given that you said bolstering the World Bank is not about countering China, in this country, credit card delinquencies have spiked, mortgage rates are through the roof, inflation remains a problem. Meanwhile, the federal deficit this year is almost tripled, and the president wants to increase funding to foreign nations through the World Bank. How is that fair to citizens in St. Scranton?
Look, I think citizens in Scranton recognize that problems that happen overseas don't stay overseas. They come here too, at great cost to working people. COVID came here from overseas. When there's massive debt or instability or conflict elsewhere, it has a drag on the global.
Listen, guys, we're struggling here as Americans, but it's not our fault. It's because it's coming from overseas. It's not our government making us, lower and lower and lower. It's overseas doing it. So in order to make us more richer and prospering, we need to support other countries with our tax-paying dollars instead of our Americans. But it's okay. It's our taxpayer money, right? They get to decide how to spend it when we earned it. They steal our money and we don't get a dime of it back. They're like a reverse Robin Hood.
Economy, and America is part of the global economy. So our perspective is that for a modest investment from the point of view of the overall size of the U.S. budget to put into ensuring greater stability, greater prosperity, greater capacity in the rest of the world, that is going to end up reducing the costs and burdens on working people in Scranton or Minneapolis or any of your all's hometowns. And frankly, that's not some novel idea. That has been a bipartisan commitment of the United States for decades. And even the last administration, the biggest skeptic of all of this, made investments in foreign aid because those investments are in the naked self-interest of the United States as well as being the right thing to do. Thank you, guys.
I'm not going to subject you to fucking Karine Jean-Pierre, but how is doing everything that's the best interest for other countries the best? What's in our best interest? That shit I don't understand. How come we as taxpayers, we don't get to vote how our money's spent? I mean, they're taking it from our paycheck because they didn't do shit to earn it. We're basically giving them money so we get to keep our money that we made. It's a fucking scam. And it's sad because people still keep voting for this shit. We gotta start standing up. No one's gonna do it though. Everybody's afraid to get canceled. They don't want to be labeled a domestic terrorist. Your government, our government, has become the government that we fought against in the Revolutionary War. Anyway, guys, I'm not telling you how to think. I'm just telling y'all to think. We all listened to the same briefing. That's what we saw. It's sad. Thank every 7 of you that showed up. Kind of feel like doing YouTube's a waste of time, so I'm gonna reevaluate some stuff. But anyway, I'll see y'all next time. Maybe on Rumble. I don't know. Or back on YouTube. I could pull a Jeff. Or a